In 1998, the World Wrestling Federation was on fire. It was barreling through the Monday Night Wars, a titan of pop culture. But in the quest to create the next big challenger for Stone Cold Steve Austin, they cooked up an idea so misguided, so arrogant, it would lead to a trail of broken bodies, a crowd in open revolt, and the utter destruction of the very man it was designed to build up. This is the story of the Brawl for All, a real fight tournament in a fake sport. It's the story of how one knockout punch didn't just end a match, it ended a legend and cemented itself as arguably the worst idea in the history of professional wrestling. To get why the Brawl for All was such a catastrophe, you have to picture the WWF in 1998. With Stone Cold Steve Austin leading the charge, the company was a force of nature. But a king meets credible challengers, and the creative machine was always looking for the next big thing. At the time, that creative engine was run by the head writer, Vince Russo, a man with an aggressive and often reckless philosophy. Russo's whole deal was reality. He believed that blurring the lines between what was real and what was scripted would hook the audience like never before. And the idea for the Brawl for All seems to have sprung from that mindset, with a little backstage ego mixed in. The story goes that John Bradshaw Layfield, a notoriously tough Texan, was bragging that he could take anyone on the roster in a bar fight. This got Russo's gears turning. What if they actually put that to the test? What if they held a real tournament to find out who the toughest man in the WWF really was? He pitched it to Vince McMahon, who reportedly loved the raw, masculine concept of a legit contest. McMahon was sold. But this wasn't just about settling a bar bet. The tournament had an intended outcome, a primary objective: to build a monster. And that monster's name was Dr. Death Steve Williams. Now, if you were a wrestling fan in America in 1998, you might not have known the full mythos of Dr. Death. But in Japan, he was a god. A former star football player and amateur wrestler from the University of Oklahoma, Steve Williams was terrifyingly legitimate. He'd spent a decade as one of the most feared competitors in all Japan Pro Wrestling, a promotion famous for its brutal, physical style. He teamed with titans like Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Vader, winning titles and leaving a trail of battered bodies behind him. He built a legendary reputation for being nearly unbeatable, with an aura that suggested he was never pinned for a stretch of almost 10 years. He wasn't a character, he was a walking, talking embodiment of raw, athletic menace. His biggest supporter in the WWF was his old friend, legendary announcer and executive Jim Ross. JR saw Williams as the perfect foil for Stone Cold. Here was a legit tough guy whose credentials couldn't be questioned. He could be presented not as a cartoon villain, but as a real-world threat to Austin's reign. The widely understood plan was for the Brawl for All to be Williams' grand introduction. He'd tear through the competition, prove his toughness beyond all doubt, and emerge as a ready-made main eventer, destined for a huge payday against Austin. The WWF signed Williams to a big contract, and the stage was set for his coronation. 16 men signed up, lured by cash bonuses for participating and advancing. The roster was a mix of mid-carders and tough guys who weren't getting much screen time, all seeing a potential opportunity. But the top stars? They wanted no part of it. Guys like Steve Austin, The Rock, and The Undertaker were smart enough to see the massive risk. Why would they jeopardize their health and drawing power in an unpredictable, real fight for a fraction of what they were already making? Even the roster's legitimate fighters, like former UFC champions Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn, were hesitant. Shamrock refused outright. Severn, after his first-round match against The Godfather, withdrew, stating he had nothing to prove and was unhappy with the chaotic rules. And those rules were a bizarre mashup of boxing and wrestling. 3 one-minute rounds. Points were given for punches, takedowns, and knockdowns. A knockout ended it all. The fighters wore oversized 16-ounce boxing gloves, a decision that turned out to be a critical flaw, making the fights clumsy and often leading to sloppy grappling instead of clean strikes. With the brackets set, the grand experiment was ready to begin. The plan was in place. Dr. Death was the chosen one, and the WWF was about to learn a very hard lesson about reality. From the very first bell, it was painfully obvious that the Brawl for All was a disaster. The live crowds, used to the over-the-top spectacle of Attitude-Era wrestling, were just confused. Instead of high-octane action, they got sloppy, exhausting brawls between men who weren't trained boxers. The big gloves made clean knockouts difficult, so fights often devolved into hugging and gassed-out grappling. The chant started almost right away. Boring, boring, and worst of all, we want wrestling! The tournament wasn't just boring the fans, it was wrecking the talent. Injuries piled up fast. Steve Blackman, a legit martial artist many expected to do well, had to pull out after hurting his knee in training. Road Warrior Hawk, an industry legend, suffered an injury in his fight against Draws. This was followed by a bizarre and ill-fated storyline about his personal demons before he eventually left the company. The career of another participant, Brackus, fizzled out not long after. One of the worst casualties was Savio Vega, who aggravated an old injury so badly it became a major factor in the end of his WWF run. This wasn't creating stars, it was ending careers. The company was sidelining talent for an angle that nobody even liked. Meanwhile, just as intended, Dr. Death Steve Williams was advancing. He beat Pierre Ouellette in the first round. It wasn't a pretty fight, but he got the win. The plan was still on track, even if it was sputtering. In the second round, Williams was set to face Bart Gunn. Bart Gunn was, for all intents and purposes, an afterthought. A career tag team wrestler, he was best known as one half of the Smoking Guns. He was a solid, reliable mid-carder, but absolutely no one saw him as a threat to win this thing. He wasn't on anyone's radar. In fact, according to Bruce Pritchard, Bart was so aware he wasn't the chosen one, he actually called management the week of the fight. He reportedly asked if he'd be fired if he knocked Dr. Death out, because he was sure he could. It was a question that must have sounded ridiculous at the time. The fight went down on the July 27, 1998 episode of Raw is War. For 2.5 rounds, it was another clumsy brawl-for-all match. Williams, the brawler, seemed to be winning on points, and the commentators were selling him as the inevitable victor. But then, with less than 30 seconds left in the final round, it all fell apart. Bart Gunn exploded forward and scored a takedown on Williams. As the 285-pound Dr. Death hit the mat, his leg buckled horribly underneath him, tearing his hamstring. It was a brutal, legitimate injury. Williams staggered back to his feet, grimacing in pain, clearly hobbled. He was a wounded animal. There were only seconds left. All he had to do was survive. He limped toward the center of the ring. Bart Gunn met him there. And then it happened. Gunn fainted, and as Williams reacted, Gunn unleashed a brutal, perfectly timed hook. The punch landed flush on Dr. Death's jaw. The sound cut through the arena noise, a sick thud of leather on bone. Williams' eyes rolled back. He was out cold before he even hit the canvas. He collapsed in a heap, a fallen giant. His mystique, his WWF career, and the company's entire plan shattered in a single, horrifying instant. The ref didn't even count. It was over. Bart Gunn, the forgotten mid-carder, had just knocked out the man who was supposed to be unbeatable. The plan was in ashes. That knockout was 100% real, and it was a career-altering blow. Dr. Death Steve Williams, the man hand-picked to be a top contender for Stone Cold Steve Austin, was now just the guy who got knocked out cold by a tag team wrestler on free TV. The mystique he had built over a decade in Japan was wiped out in less than 10 seconds. The immediate aftermath was devastating. The torn hamstring alone would have meant months of recovery, But the public humiliation of the knockout was the wound he'd never recover from in the WWF. His push was dead on arrival. He made a few forgettable appearances months later, but the magic was gone. The aura of invincibility, the very foundation of his character, was gone. By April 1999, less than a year after he was signed to be a top star, Steve Williams was quietly released. The grand plan didn't just fail to make him a star, it destroyed his chance at mainstream American success. He returned to Japan, where his reputation was more intact, but his moment in the American spotlight was gone forever. Steve Williams tragically passed away from throat cancer in 2009 at 49, leaving his disastrous WWF run as one of wrestling's great what-ifs. So what about the victor? What about Bart Gunn, the man who did the impossible? Surely, the guy who won a legit fighting tournament by knocking out the Chosen One would get a massive push, right? Well, this isn't a fairy tale. The WWF had a problem. Their hand-picked monster was slain, and the giant killer was a guy they had no creative plans for. Bart Gunn went on to win the whole tournament, beating Bradshaw in the finals for the $75,000 prize. But victory felt more like a punishment. It's been widely reported that there was immense heat on Gunn backstage. Jim Ross, Williams' close friend, was allegedly furious that Gunn had derailed their plans. Instead of being celebrated, Bart Gunn was put on ice. His prize for winning was a professional execution. At WrestleMania 15, the biggest show of the year, the WWF booked Gunn in another real fight. His opponent wasn't a wrestler, he was a professional boxer. A knockout artist weighing nearly 300 pounds named Eric Butterbean Esch. Butterflies Bean was a legitimate, heavy-handed puncher. To make it worse, the fight was under boxing rules, taking away Gunn's takedown advantage. It was a setup. Bob Holly later said the company wanted Bart to be embarrassed for messing up their plans with Dr. Death. The match at WrestleMania lasted 35 seconds. Gunn, completely out of his element, tried to box with a boxer. Butterbean landed a massive overhand right that sent Bart crashing to the mat, knocked out cold in a chilling echo of what he'd done to Dr. Death. The message was clear: you don't defy the script. Shortly after WrestleMania, Bart Gunn was released. His career, like the man he conquered, was another casualty of the Brawl for All. He found respect in Japan, where his knockout of the legendary Dr. Death was seen as a badge of honor, but his American career was over. The legacy of the Brawl for All is one of total failure. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when a wrestling company gets high on its own supply of reality. It cost the company an estimated $350,000 in payouts, not to mention medical bills and the cost of sideline talent. It failed to create a single sustainable new star. It produced zero compelling television. All it left was a trail of broken bodies and ruined careers. In the years since, it has been widely condemned by almost everyone involved. Jim Ross called it a disaster. Sean X-Pac Waltman called it the dumbest fucking idea in WWE history. Vince Russo, the architect of the chaos, remains one of its few defenders, but the results speak for themselves. The Brawl for All stands as a monument to hubris. It was a misguided attempt to prove something that never needed proving, born from a fundamental misunderstanding of what fans actually wanted. They didn't want sloppy, real fights. They wanted larger-than-life characters in epic, well-told stories. The tournament gave them the exact opposite. It exposed the business, it hurt the performers, and it sabotaged the legacy of a legend. It was the night the WWF tried to create a killer, and instead, just killed a career. If you enjoy these deep dives into wrestling history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new video. And let me know in the comments below, what other infamous wrestling moments do you want to see broken down? Thanks for watching.